Good morning and Shabbat Shalom, and welcome back once again. And it is our real pleasure to study and learn with our teacher, Rabbi Hillel Silverman. Good morning, Hillel. Shabbat Shalom.
Good morning. Shabbat Shalom to you.
This morning we're in Parshat Mishpatim, right in the middle of the book of Shemot, a parsha that's so filled with law and with a whole vision of how a society should be governed. So, talk to us about this parsha.
It's a wonderful, wonderful parsha. Last Saturday we had the Ten Commandments, and no document can be more important for Judaism than the Ten Commandments. But the Ten Commandments are not in the prayer book, which is very strange. If it's so important, why isn't it recited every day in the prayer book? The answer, obviously, is that there is more to Judaism, a lot more to Judaism than the Ten Commandments. This morning's Sedra is an example of what is more significant than the Ten Commandments. Elu Mishpatim, these are the laws, the moral, the ethical, the ritual laws of Judaism. We might say that the Ten Commandments are a preamble to the Constitution, but the Constitution are all of the ethical and moral and ritual laws that follow. And these are, of course, in the Talmud and the Bible, of course, civil law, criminal law, property law, marital law, business law, the 613 so-called mitzvot, the Taryag mitzvot, many, many hundreds, of course, don't apply today. They have to do with the temple, the sacrifice, and the ritual. It's just, anyway, I'm going to discuss with you today a few of these laws that appear in this morning's Parsha. We have the laws of slavery, a long section on slavery. What could be more cruel, more inhumane than criminal, than slavery, to subjugate human beings? But when we examine the laws of slavery in the Bible, we see that they are much, much more humane. The Bible talks about an Eved Ivri, the Hebrew, a slave. How does a Jew become a slave? A debt. He's in debt. He has to repay a debt. Or he has committed a crime and he has to pay a penalty. The interesting aspect of the law today of slavery is that the slave works 6 years and then is freed the 7th year. The word is Evan, which doesn't really mean slave. It means worker. Avadim occurs when the Jews were slaves to the Egyptians. Avadim hayinu leferu Mitzrayim. But here, these are workers. And what happens at the end of the 6th year? The slave goes free. But the slave may not want to go free. Can you imagine a slave who, after 6 years, would say, Ahavti, I love my master, my wife, my children. I do not want to go free. I would like to remain as a worker in his household. That just speaks highly of the way Jews were treated. So what does the Bible say this morning? The Bible says, you shall take the servant, the slave, to the mezuzah, to the door of the house, and you shall take an awl, a drill, and drill a hole in his ear. And this ear hole is not a penalty, it's not a sigma. Actually, it's an evidence that this servant, this slave, could have been free after 6 years, but chose to remain in the household of the master. So much for slavery in the Bible. This does not compare with slavery as was experienced in the world, in Africa, and in the early centuries of American history. Another interesting law with moral overtone, ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye, an ear for an earth. This is lex talionis. It seems to be quite unfair. You take out a person's eye because he removed your eye? Not at all. The Talmud says in Baba Kama, mammon. It's monetary compensation. Of course, it's difficult to evaluate the worth of an eye. A painter's eye or an artist's eye may be worth more than a bricklayer's eye. But the whole point is that the evidence, the punishment should fit the crime. An eye for an eye, not more than the crime. This goes back to days when Jews received terrible punishment out of all Jew people received terrible punishment out of all proportion to the crime that they committed. In the late 19th century, a little boy was executed for stealing a loaf of bread. Not the Talmud, not the Bible, not the Jewish way. Another interesting law, thou shalt not favor a poor man. That seems incredible. You mean you don't have compassion upon one who is poor? Well, we have to understand that this directly was centric to the judge. The judge must be impartial in his judgment. He shall not favor a poor man because the poor man is guilty of a crime. Impartial judgment, impartial legality. Now we'll go to another interesting law. We have in this morning's Torah reading about a thief who steals an ox. If he steals an ox and they find him, he shall repay 5 times the value of the ox. And if it's a lamb that he has stolen, then he shall compensate 4 times the value of the lamb. Why is that? Well, you might say on the surface, because an ox is worth more money than a lamb. If an ox is stolen, therefore, he should be paid back more than for the lamb. But again, our rabbis tell us this doesn't have to do just with the value of the animal. This law has to do with compassion. With compassion. Here we have Rahman's compassion for the Ganav, for the one who stole the ox or the lamb. How do you steal an ox? Well, the way to steal an ox is to put an halter on the ox and walk down the street. You walk down Wilshire Boulevard with an ox on an halter, and they know that the ox must buy your ox. You wouldn't walk with a halter. But how does a thief steal a lamb? He has to carry the lamb. Well, obviously, it is not his lamb. He has stolen it. So you pay more in recompense for a lamb than for an ox. Another law tomorrow morning. If you find a donkey that has fallen, or the man who hates you, you shall surely help him set the animal aright. In other words, our Bible tells us you must help even your enemy. And if he says, and he shall write it emo with him helping. If he does not pitch in and help, then you have no obligation to assist. You might be driving your automobile on the freeway, and you find an automobile that is disabled. Somebody is changing the tire. You stop your car, you help him change the tire. But if he sits on the curb and watches you set the automobile aright and change the tire, then you have no obligation. Another interesting law in the many of this morning's Sedra, thou must not do evil, must not follow a multitude to do evil. Achrei rabim labot, to follow a multitude to do evil. It's easy to conform to the majority, even if the majority is wrong. I'm sure this begins when we go to school, that it wants to be popular, and oftentimes we side with the majority, even if the majority is incorrect. This explains the behavior of people who join gangs. It's easy to go with the majority. It's easy to want to be popular. We have to be faithful to our convictions. It has been said we have to be a minority of one. And so the Bible this morning goes on and on with such interesting observations, of course, all chastened by the Talmud. We started off by saying that Judaism is more than the Ten Commandments. And we wonder why then is the Ten Commandments not a prayer in our prayer book? And the answer, of course, is that Judaism is more than the Ten Commandments. Judaism are all of these laws, these mishpatim, as evinced in the Talmud. We mentioned that the Ten Commandments are of extreme importance. They are the preamble to the Constitution. But the Constitution are the laws of the Jewish religion: civil laws, criminal laws, business laws, property laws, moral laws, ethical laws, ritual laws. 613 so-called commandments give insight into our behavior, moral behavior, and ritual behavior. I find a lot of this in the Talmud, which gives great insight to all of the laws of the Bible. The Talmud is not a commentary on the Talmud, but it helps us understand the Talmud. Let's spend a minute talking about the Talmud. What is the Talmud? Well, the Talmud consists first of the Mishnah, finished approximately 200 of the Common Era, 6th session, Shishamidrash, and it's in Hebrew, the Hebrew that is used today as a spoken language in Israel. Then comes the Gemara. The Talmud is the Mishnah and the Gemara. There's a Jerusalem Talmud, finished about 400 of the Common Era, and of the Babylonian Talmud, which completed about 550 of the Common Era. 63 tractates in the Talmud. Let's go on and discuss how a Jewish law evolved. After the Talmud comes the Mishnah Torah. Maimonides, in the year 1250, he passed away. And he was a codifier. And at that time, the Jews were unable to understand all of these teachings. And so he codified them. 100 years later, in the year 1475, came Jacob Asher, who put together what is called the Torah. Then came the Shulchan Aruch in the year 1560, Joseph Cairo. And after that, the Kisser, Shulchan Aruch, in 1864. And so we find this description of all of the laws, of all of the mishpatim of Judaism. We have a great commentator, Rashi, who lived in 1040. We have the Tosafos in 1100, Ibn Ezra, 1100. And up to this day, we have rabbis and scholars and institutions who give tshuvot, who give commentaries on these laws. The Rabbinic Assembly, our own conservative body, also does this. There is the law committee, which decides how to amplify and comment on Jewish laws. The great subjects of the conservative law committee were the place of women. Women had the right to be counted in a minyan and driving on Shabbat, just as two examples. Well, we discussed today some of the laws, the mishpatim of Judaism, and I'll spend the next 2 Saturdays continuing the discussion with the sedras that are coming up so that we can understand more clearly what Judaism really teaches and what Judaism really espouses. Shabbat Shalom, have a good Shabbos.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. It's always an honor to learn with you, and we look forward to your continuing discourse on the laws of the Talmud and the laws of the Parsha and how the Parsha has been put together by the Talmudic rabbis. Thank you so much, and many blessings for Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. Thank you.